now is the best time, if not ever, to be a developer. I think as we see in the Ontario curriculum, they're making coding part of mandatory education for even grade ones.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Finding Purpose YouTube series brought to you by Unleashing Your Awesome Career Coaching. I get a lot of questions from job seekers about how to choose a career that matches what they love, what they're good at, and what the world needs. And how do they get their foot into the door? In my quest to simplify the process of helping people figure out their purpose, I went out and interviewed people who have been successful so they can share with you insights that can transform your career. Today, I am interviewing Steve, a development manager from Shopify. Steve is a coach, mentor, dev at heart, and a genuinely happy guy. All right, Steve, it's so good to see you today. Thank you for joining and wanting to share your experience. Can you give us a little bit of a background about yourself?
Sure. Ooh, long story. So fun fact, I actually was never always in the tech industry. This is actually my third career switch. So
Wow.
from high school, I thought I wanted to be in trade skills. So Fast and Furious just came out. Cars were everything. I thought I wanted to be an automotive technician. So I actually pursued an apprenticeship in that. After a few years down the road, I realized it wasn't for me. And I actually switched into cooking because I had really fond memories of cooking with my mom. And I thought, okay, maybe that's what I want to do. So while I was doing that, I was also trying to just do something to appease the parents. So I still had to go to university and do computer science just to make sure that they're happy. So I was cooking while I was doing computer science. And it slowly gravitated towards the fact that being a cook was fun, but the dedication required and school just couldn't compete. So I chose school, pursued that, and ended up just picking up a bunch of freelancing gigs. Started off in front-end web development, eventually went back and forth between front-end to full stack to consulting, and going between products and consultancies, and eventually ended up as a dev manager, just walking people through my own discovery of how your careers are never very linear. You kind of have to kind of explore and find out what you think you're good at and just go on a trajectory and just feel it out for yourself.
That's amazing. So what made you decide to get into tech? I mean, what was the defining moment for you?
To be very blunt, it was that it paid off my tuition. I'm going to be very honest, but there was something about tech that actually started before. So in trade skills, it's very tangible when you know you're doing something right. With fixing cars, I understand a car. If I fix it and it's working, yay. Food, if I cook good food, people are going to like it. With code, especially why I like front-end development, is if I do something right, there's immediate visual feedback. So I almost had the same sort of mindset going into it. And so be it front-end, be it full stack, even with consulting and working with other people, it's the same sort of mentality where as soon as you understand something, you can continue and exploring how much you can make it better. So that's really what got me into it. And of course, sky's the limit when it comes to tech.
Wow. And then, did you have any technical background as you went to it? How did you develop your technical skills? Because it sounds like you came from a very, like you enjoyed cooking and you went to cooking school, and then did you have to go back to school again to kind of become a developer?
So I actually never went to culinary school to be a chef. I fortunately, unfortunately, always had to learn on the spot.
Wow.
So my first cooking gig, it was actually at a place where you cook in front of people. And so from day one of my training, it's like, hey, here are 3 dishes, go make them when clients want them. Just make it. Like, I don't know how to make these. It's like, yeah, you can. So with tech and everything else, it's kind of been that same mentality where it's someone has given you the benefit of doubt that you're able to do your task. And now it's up to you to find out how to do it. So that has actually been a very big learning lesson for me. It's you don't do things you know you're capable of. You do things that you know you can find out how to do. and then you obsess over the fact that you can learn, because it's not like those resources don't exist. People wouldn't ask you to do things unless they didn't think it was feasible. And so keeping that in mind, it's made everything kind of very easy to explore.
Wow, interesting. And it sounds like you went to University of Toronto and got your Bachelor of Science in Computer
Mhm.
Science. Did you feel that was enough to become a developer, or did you have to supplement that with
Yeah,
other
definitely.
learning?
Definitely not. University was great because it was a place where I could start thinking about things in different ways and figure out how to organize my thoughts. But in terms of like the hands-on skills, yeah, definitely have to be in the industry, pick up freelance gigs to just know. It's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know, and every case is going to be different. So the earlier you can get experience, the better. I think the thing that helped me out the most was opting in to do an internship and just seeing what the real world was like. Because the real world's definitely not going to teach me how what's the best practice for coding, what do I need to do next, even just general coding libraries, right? I mean, university has very particular curriculums they want to stick with, and that may or may not cater to what you want to learn.
What would you tell someone who has a zero development background, never went to school for computer science,
Mhm.
and is thinking of becoming a developer? What would be your advice to them?
First of all, exciting. Now is the best time, if not ever, to be a developer. I think, as we see in the Ontario curriculum, they're making coding part of mandatory education for even grade ones because it's so fundamental to everything we do and how we behave. So good on you for kind of pursuing that curiosity. Take advantage of a lot of the high intensity, the after work programs. You have or incubator programs. So you have places like Brain Station, you have Maker Labs, you have a bunch of these other 2-3 week programs that help people like yourself who are thinking of even just pursuing this as a career choice or even just curiosity. You just want to pick up something new. It's perfectly designed so that there is zero expectation on your background knowledge and just understanding the fundamentals, but also getting your hands dirty. And at the end of the 2 to 3 week course, coming out with something and being proud of it. So that I would say is a really, really good starting point.
I like your advice about the virtual coffees. That's very valuable, and that's something that I always encourage my clients to do because
Mhm.
it's really difficult to kind of learn what's hot in the market in terms of languages or what kind of, whether there's demands in front end development or back end development or machine
Right.
learning. You can't get that knowledge unless you talk to people who are currently working in these organizations. What are some examples of boot camps that or resources that people can look for?
I'll probably have to paste the link below or somewhere else, wherever
Yeah,
captions
sure.
are. Yeah, Brain Station would be an example of a place I can think of off the top of my head. Maker Lab, and I'm glad you used the word bootcamp because I forgot that word. But there's definitely quite a few of them all around Toronto. But
Okay.
actually, any major city, and even if it's not specific to the city anymore, they're always online virtually. I know Udemy was a really big one as well for just like an online resource. Um, yeah, there's quite a few out there for sure. From the perspective of when I'm looking for applications when we hire people, education is important, but it's not the de facto decision that decides if someone's capable. Having a bachelor's degree is nice, but I think that devalues other types of education as well. So I look at, for instance, the computer science program at Seneca College, very practical, very hands-on. They actually do partnerships with businesses to actually do real world and solve real world problems. Example is them working with GoTrain to actually develop the Go app. That was really big, and that's something tons of commuters use every single day. In terms of your portfolio, absolutely. Especially in my line of work, I care less about what's on paper and I care more about what you're doing now. Especially someone who's humbling themselves and coming in with, hey, I'm new, I want to explore. The best way to demonstrate that is a portfolio because it's actual evidence that this is work you're personally proud of. It represents you and your entire journey of learning, but it also shows that you're still curious. There are different pieces of conversation that we can have. And it's not about polishing the work. It's understanding where you're exploring, what you're excited about, and frankly, like what you actually want to do. Actually came off a call recently with a student who's really excited about AI learning. So he did a project that just predicted the outcomes of soccer games, just as a funny project. So that was a really fun topic to talk about, and him just walking through how he learned machine learning.
Wow, that's awesome. Great. And do you have any advice for folks in terms of how they could prepare for technical interviews?
Yeah, I think specifically with the portfolio stuff, make sure your portfolio reads well. If you were to think of it like in a packaged product, packaged products usually come with an instruction manual. If someone other than yourself came in, looked at your project, could they understand your instruction manual? Do they understand what they're looking at? That would be the first piece. The second piece is remember that your portfolio is a large conversation piece. So make sure you can speak to it. Make sure you understand how it works. Make sure it's easily navigatable, because people want to understand your project. They don't want to hear the nitty-gritties of why it's complicated. They can decide that on their own. So focus on the appreciation of the content. In some cases, there are still places that will do algorithms. I will put a big asterisk on those because I think, this is a personal opinion, I think algorithms are a poor representation of developer capability. That being said, some places still do them. There are tons of resources online to practice algorithms and to get better at them. I know there's a book that's passed around quite a bit. It's the Google interview questions. It's a pretty comprehensive list of different algorithms. If you want more fun places to practice them, hackerrank.com is a pretty common place for algorithm practice. The other one is something called the Advent of Code. It's kind of like the Christmas Advent calendar, where for every day in December, they post one new problem-solving question per day. And so you can challenge yourself to see how you can accomplish those, because those are pretty good. What I like about communities like that is if you feel stuck, there's at least a community of people that will post their solutions, so you can kind of get an idea of what to get into, so you don't have to feel lost. But I would say spend more time in your portfolios and projects, and spend a small portion, but still recognizable portion of time, just practicing some algorithms, just because some places still require it.
What would you say the demand is in the market right now in terms of the development? Is it, I don't know, machine learning, front end, back end? What's a good area that folks can specialize in?
Oh, that's a toughie. I feel like there's still demand across the board. What I'm starting to see now is I'm starting to see more towards large data. Definitely machine learning has been really big, but it's not, there's two parts to the machine learning part. There's the algorithms and optimizations to how we learn, but then there's also the infrastructure that has to support that learning. So DevOps, the DevOps portion is really big. So I know Google has a program for getting certification on Google Cloud Platform. Amazon obviously has one. Microsoft has one as well. So those are definitely worth looking into. Kubernetes has blown up over the years. It's part of the whole infrastructure ecosystem. Things like front-end development are never going to go away, because when I say front-end development, I do mean web or mobile, iOS, Android, always in demand. There's no shortage of apps out there. There's no shortage of us using the web. So I think the world's your oyster. I think if you were to look at market versus capabilities, I will say that front-end development, because it's easier to get into because you have bootcamp programs, you also have to remember that there's going to be more people to compete with. So even though there's a market for it, you do have to work a bit harder to get into it. Whereas places like dev infrastructure, there are less people getting into it, but the trade-off is it's also harder to get into, and there's less education available on learning how to get there, and there's less validation on whether or not you're doing it right. So in those cases, it's very important that you network with people who are in the industry and can help you guide to the right resources. Because for sure, when you're done your Google Platform certification, you got to know what's next. You got to know what you have to learn next to make your career worthwhile.
Is there like a kind of tell in terms of where you could fit in based on your abilities and your skill set? Like if you're meant to be a front-end developer versus back-end developer, or cloud architecture, or more on the data side?
Yeah, I think the tell will be your own personal, you'll find you'll gravitate towards things. The natural curiosity of learning has an interesting way of gravitating you towards things you're actually interested in. So for me, I'm obsessed with visual feedback, which is what got me into front-end development. People who are obsessed with scaling and supporting large networks, also people that don't want to deal with interfaces. That could be back-end or dev infrastructure. People that want to build information that can service a lot of people, maybe that's more back-end. So it really comes down to what problems they like to solve. I think they'll find that their natural knack to go to that will determine what they want to do.
That's really good advice. I think with everything, it's just trial and error until you find your fit. I'm really curious to know where you spend your time mostly these days.
Yeah. It will differ from day to day. So I'll approach it this way. The things I care about the most, first and foremost, is the mental, physical, and emotional health of my team. And so that it disperses throughout my time throughout the day. It's just making sure that people feel heard and listened is key. The next part is making sure that we always have buy-in and making sure that everyone has the same alignment and vision as to what we're doing. So a lot of my work just involves making sure that we're all on the same pace together, and for lack of an analogy, that we're all in the same boat, pushing in the same direction. Some parts of my work may involve talking to other stakeholders or other related teams, because as you'll find in big companies, your work, your individual contribution does not mean individual output. It's much part of a larger picture. But of course, to draw the picture out, you have to include all members somehow. So a lot of it is making sure that other teams are aware of what we're doing, that it makes sense with them, and that ultimately all our work aligns with what the company is actually looking for, and that everyone knows what to expect down the road. And the last part is setting up my teams to succeed. So if there are huge blockers on new features, I'll usually scout out to make sure, one, it's feasible, and if it's not, who do we need to get involved to make this thing happen? Because it might depend on another team or another technology stack or something else.
Wow. So it sounds like there's an element of coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't necessarily just, do development, but there's an element of coaching that you can progress to as a development manager.
That's right. Yeah, I think one often misconception about going to engineering is that it has to be purely technical. So what I'm seeing in a lot of companies now is there is starting to be a delineation between indexing really high on technical proficiency and indexing higher on things that are non-technical and more soft skills. So sometimes we might call them high EQ, high emotional intelligence. And that's kind of the track that I'm starting to go along. So it does, both these tracks require you to have some sort of hands-on tech savviness. The difference is if you're going towards one path, which some companies might call staff engineer, then you're much more focused on technical leadership. So you're the ones looking for new technology, best practices, trying to guide all your colleagues and the company into a very specific implementation direction. Whereas dev managers like myself, we're much more concerned about the health of the organization and how we work together. Especially, you'll see a lot of companies start with cultural principles. These cultural principles still make sense. How are we exemplifying them? How do we find them in existing colleagues, but also prospective new employees as well?
So this is a fun question.
Sure.
Have you ever wanted to do something, but someone said you shouldn't do it?
Oh, all the time. Um, some of them with good reason. Like for instance, I shouldn't belly flop off a 10-foot diving pole, right? Or diving board. There we go. Probably shouldn't do it because it's gonna hurt, and it hurt. Um, I definitely think being a Asian person like myself, there's a lot of doubt from your parents. So even when I wanted to cook as a profession, there was don't do that, doesn't make money. Uh, but I still pursued it anyways. Uh, and I think other times it's I tell myself don't do this because it's nonsense. So one thing I actually really wanted to do when I was still learning how to cook was actually cook in a different country and just spend time there. Um, Unfortunately, the timing didn't work out, so I didn't do it. But I think given certain circumstances, I would gladly explore that again. I think the allegory to come out of doubts like that is if you come to a place where someone tells you don't do something, I mean, really nothing stops you from doing it. If it's something you feel good about exploring, explore it. I think the better way to look at it is there's a chance that someone else is going to explore that same avenue with you and might have some reluctance. So be it a friend, be it a family member, be it someone in the wild, wild west, find someone to do that with, because I think it makes the journey of that exploration that much more exciting and worth pursuing.
Very cool. Awesome. So what about your strengths? What would you say are your strengths that led you to become a developer?
I think it's my knack to, I obsess over not knowing something. So there's this need for me to immediately dive deep and understand how something works. One example is if I have a bug or something doesn't work the way I want, I'm not going to say, okay, I'm done for the day. I'm going to say, okay, I'm not going to fix this bug. I want to find out what caused this bug and why it exists. Because more than likely, this bug is not the real problem. There's something deeply rooted underneath that. And if I don't fix that underneath rooting thing, these bugs are going to happen again in a slightly different form. So let's solve the actual issue. I think the other thing about being a developer is just being very keen on feedback, realizing that the only way you're going to get better as a developer is to be very open and to be very vulnerable about accepting feedback all the time and taking it as a gift. The more feedback you get, it's not about bad or good. It's the intention that people are trying to make you better. So you take it full on and say thank you, because honestly, all of it is helpful to make you a better developer. So definitely those two things have helped me a lot. Right.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, Steve, for sharing all your experience with us today. That was so awesome.
Of course. I'm happy to do this.
Great.